The sun over Ouagadougou was merciless that day, a white flame hanging over the city, turning every shadow into a memory of struggle. Dust floated through the air like forgotten prayers, and the sound of engines echoed down narrow, crowded streets. The middle of that chaos, one man, a soldier, a leader, a son of the soil, sat in a black, armored vehicle, his mind already buried in meetings and decisions that could change a nation. But fate had other plans. Because sometimes the greatest revolutions begin not in offices or parliaments, but on the streets, in the eyes of a single child. As Captain Ibrahim Traoré's convoy rolled through the heart of one of Ouagadougou's poorest districts, laughter was nowhere to be heard. Children should have been chasing footballs, their laughter bouncing between the walls like music. But that afternoon, there was only silence and the sound of something heavy being dragged through dust. That's when Ibrahim saw him, a little boy, no older than 8. His bare feet were cracked from heat, his small hands gripping a pile of red clay bricks, each one heavier than the dreams he carried. His spine curved under the weight. Every step looked like a fight between survival and surrender. And yet, he didn't stop. Ibrahim's hand, almost by instinct, rose in the air. "Stop the car." The driver hesitated. His security chief turned instantly. "Sir, this area isn't secure. We're late for—" "I said stop the car." Ibrahim repeated, his tone quiet but absolute, the kind of voice that carried both authority and empathy. The convoy screeched to a halt, kicking up a storm of red dust that painted the sunlight in gold. Soldiers stepped out instantly, scanning rooftops, hands ready on their rifles. But Ibrahim wasn't looking at them. His eyes, sharp, focused, human, were locked on the boy. The child had stopped walking. The bricks in his arms trembled. His lips quivered as the soldiers surrounded him, unsure whether to run or cry. And then something no one expected happened. Ibrahim opened his door, not with the pride of a leader, but the humility of a father. He stepped out, the sun catching his uniform, his boots sinking into the dust of the same streets he had once walked as a young man. He removed his cap, a small gesture, but powerful. Because in that moment, the president of Burkina Faso wasn't standing before a child. A brother was kneeling before his own reflection. Ibrahim crouched down, lowering himself until his eyes met the boy's. "Little brother," he said softly, his voice carrying the warmth of rain after drought. "What's your name?" The boy looked up, terrified, confused. His lips trembled. His eyes filled with tears that streaked through the dust on his face. He tried to speak, but no sound came out. "You're not in trouble," Ibrahim whispered, the tone gentle enough to calm even a storm. "I just want to know your name." A long silence. Only the sound of the wind and the distant noise of the city. Then, a whisper, fragile as hope itself. "Amadou," he said. That name, that single word, would haunt Ibrahim long after that day, because following Amadou would uncover something darker than poverty, a secret buried beneath the dust and bricks of a forgotten people. And what Ibrahim Traoré would discover next would test not just his power, but his heart. To understand leadership, you must first understand compassion. Stay with me, because what happens next will make you question what it truly means to serve your people. "Amadou," Ibrahim repeated, letting the name echo softly as though it carried the soul of a nation. He looked down at the bricks in the boy's arms, jagged, uneven, heavy with dust and destiny. "These bricks," Ibrahim asked gently, "where are you taking them?" Amadou's voice came out between breaths, his small chest rising and falling. "To the construction site, sir, near the market. I carry them all day, 20 trips when sometimes 25. 25 trips. Ibrahim froze. His heart clenched as if someone had wrapped a chain around it. 25 trips, under the same burning sun that made grown men faint. This boy should have been learning how to write his name, not breaking his back for a meal. "Why?" Ibrahim asked, though his voice trembled with the fear of knowing. Amadou's lips quivered. Tears welled in his eyes, cutting pale streaks through the dirt on his face. My father died in the mines, sir. 3 months ago. Mama is sick, she coughs all night. My sister, she cries when there's no food. The man at the site gives me 500 francs each trip. Ibrahim's eyes darkened. 500 francs. Less than a single US dollar. A price tag on a child's suffering. For a moment, Ibrahim said nothing. He just looked, really looked, at the boy. At the small, trembling hands that carried not only bricks, but the weight of an entire generation forgotten by the world. Around them, the neighborhood had begun to awaken. Men stepped out from workshops. Women paused from washing clothes. Children peeked from behind doorways. The president's convoy, here, in their street. It didn't feel real. Some whispered, others stared. Another photo moment, a man muttered bitterly. They all pretend to care before returning to their mansions. But this time, it was different, because Ibrahim wasn't posing for cameras. He wasn't looking for headlines. He was looking at Amadou. Slowly, he knelt again, placing a steady hand on the boy's shoulder. Amadou, he said softly, I need you to show me something. Take me to your home. I want to meet your mother and your sister. Will you do that for me? The boy blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. The president, the man on television, wanted to come to his house. He nodded silently, and then to everyone's astonishment, Ibrahim lifted the bricks from the boy's hands. The crowd gasped. The soldiers froze. A leader of a nation, carrying the load of a child. They walked, 300 meters, but each step felt like a journey through the heart of inequality itself. The path twisted through narrow lanes, between rusted tin shacks and walls patched with old fabric. Children watched silently, clutching half-eaten mangoes. Women stopped cooking to stare. The sound of Ibrahim's boots in the dirt, heavy, deliberate, became the rhythm of defiance. He carried Amadou's bricks himself. At first, they seemed manageable, but by 50 meters, his arms began to ache. The rough edges cut into his palms. Sweat rolled down his temples. And in that moment, for the first time, the president felt what poverty truly weighed like. His security detail followed, restless. This isn't protocol, one whispered into the radio. We need more units. Crowds were forming behind them, cautious, curious, reverent. But Ibrahim walked on, his breath steady, his mind locked on the boy ahead, each brick dug deeper, not just into his hands, but into his heart. Sir, his aide called, panting as he caught up. The ministers are waiting. There are calls from the African Union. The French ambassador is asking for... Ibrahim stopped. The entire convoy halted behind him. He turned slowly, his expression unreadable, eyes burning not with anger, but with truth. Listen carefully, he said, his tone low, firm, every word measured. Every phone call I ignore, every meeting I miss, can be rescheduled. He paused. The sun flared behind him, outlining his figure like a soldier carved from fire and faith. But every child like Amadou, every hungry mouth, every broken home we pass without stopping, they cannot wait. A heavy silence fell over the crowd. Even the guards lowered their rifles slightly, as if humbled. For a long moment, nobody spoke. And then Ibrahim turned again, still carrying the bricks, and followed the boy deeper into the labyrinth of his people's forgotten suffering. What he found in that house would break something inside him and awaken something greater. A truth buried beneath poverty and silence, a mother fighting death, a child fighting despair, and a leader who realized that real power is not held in palaces, but in the courage to kneel in the dust beside the forgotten. Stay with me, because what happens next will change everything. Ibrahim turned to his aide, his voice low but burning with conviction. If I walk away from this child right now, he said slowly, the air trembling with his words, if I return to my office and pretend I didn't see this, then I am not fit to lead this nation. The aide froze, then nodded, speechless. Around them, the murmurs of the crowd grew louder. Some whispered in awe, others in disbelief. He's different, one woman said softly, but another voice rose from the shadows. sharp, bitter. They all say that. Tomorrow he'll forget just like the rest. The words cut through the heat like a blade. And then, from the crowd, an elderly woman stepped forward. Her skin was lined with years of endurance, her eyes both tired and defiant. "Mr. President," she called, her voice trembling. "My grandson, he carries water jerry cans, 25 kilos, 10 times a day. He is only 9. Will you help him too?" The crowd fell silent again. Her words hung in the air like a prayer that had waited too long for an answer. Ibrahim turned toward her, the dust swirling between them. "What is his name?" he asked gently. The woman blinked, surprised. "Usman," she said, her voice cracking. "His name is Usman." Ibrahim nodded slowly. "I will remember Usman," he said. "I will remember all of them." For a moment, hope flickered in her eyes. But before it could take root, another voice, male, hard, and angry, erupted from the crowd. "Words!" the man shouted. "We've heard enough words. The French gave us words. Every politician before you gave us words. We don't need speeches, we need change." The air thickened. Soldiers moved instinctively, hands drifting toward their weapons. But Ibrahim raised his hand, stopping them cold. He stepped forward, meeting the man's fiery gaze. "You're right," Ibrahim said. His voice carried the weight of mountains. Not defensive, not angry, but honest. "Words mean nothing without action. So watch me," he pointed to his own chest. "Hold me accountable. If I fail, call me out. That is your right. That is your duty." For a heartbeat, there was only silence. The kind of silence that shifts the air when people realize they've witnessed something rare, something true. The convoy began to move again. Not as a display of power, but as a pilgrimage of conscience. Ibrahim walked behind Amadou, still carrying the bricks. As more villages joined, mothers, fathers, children, a procession of the forgotten, following the only leader who had ever dared to walk among them without armor. Amadou turned a corner, and then, there it was, a small structure that could barely be called a home. Corrugated metal sheets patched with wood and plastic tarps, tied together by rope. And hope. It stood like a wounded soldier refusing to fall. Ibrahim paused at the doorway. Through the gaps in the wall, he saw a woman lying on a thin mat. Her body trembled with fever. Her breath came in shallow waves. Beside her sat a little girl, no older than 4, her eyes wide. Her stomach bloated from hunger. She clutched a piece of torn fabric as if it could protect her from the world. "Mama!" Amadou whispered, stepping inside. His voice softened to the tone of a prayer. "I brought someone who wants to help." The woman stirred weakly. Her eyes opened, dull at first, then sharpening with disbelief as they fell on the uniformed figure kneeling beside her son. It took her a moment to understand who he was. "Mr. President?" she rasped, barely above a whisper. Ibrahim knelt lower. "No, ma'am," he said softly. "Not today. Today I am just a brother who came to listen." For a moment the world seemed to stop breathing. Behind him, soldiers looked away, some swallowing hard, others pretending to adjust their radios to hide the emotion on their faces. Even the skeptical man from the crowd stood silently now, the anger in his eyes replaced by something far deeper, respect. And as Ibrahim sat beside the dying woman, the fevered air thick with silence and dust, he realized this wasn't just about one family. It was a mirror, reflecting every broken promise, every hungry child, every ignored cry across the continent. But he wasn't here to pity them. He was here to begin something, because true change doesn't start in speeches. It starts in the dust. The quiet places where no one is watching. Stay with me. Because what Ibrahim Traoré does next will not only move a nation, it will test the soul of leadership itself. The dim light struggled to enter through cracks in the rusted metal walls. The air inside was thick, a blend of heat, dust, and sickness. Amadou ducked under the low entrance, followed by the towering figure of President Ibrahim Traoré. "Mama." "The president is here," Amadou said softly. The woman on the mat stirred weakly. Her thin hands trembled as she tried to rise, panic flickering in her tired eyes. "The president?" she whispered in disbelief. Amadou, what have you done? We have nothing. He cannot see us like this. We are not presentable. Her voice cracked, half shame, half exhaustion. Ibrahim bent low to enter the shack, his broad shoulders brushing the doorway. His boots touched the dirt floor. There was no furniture, no electricity, not even a chair to sit on. Only a few cracked plastic containers, a torn mat, and a smell of illness that clung to the walls like a shadow. "Forgive me, sir," the woman murmured, lowering her eyes. "Forgive our poverty. Forgive that we have nothing." Ibrahim's expression softened. He knelt beside her, just as he had knelt beside her son earlier that day. "Sister, there is nothing to forgive," he said quietly. "The shame is not yours. The shame belongs to the system that allowed this, to those of us in power who did not do enough." The woman blinked, confused by the tenderness in his tone. For a moment, the great weight of her suffering seemed to lift. Outside, a crowd pressed closer to the small home. The murmurs of the people blended with the hum of the city beyond. Some climbed onto rooftops, straining to see through the small gaps. Others whispered prayers. Unsure if what they were witnessing was real or staged, Ibrahim's aide stood at the doorway, his phone buzzing endlessly. Calls from ministers, ambassadors, secretaries. "The French ambassador demands an update," he whispered nervously. "The press is already reporting, sir." "We need to move, but Ibrahim didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the frail woman in front of him, on her hollow cheeks and sunken eyes, on the small girl beside her clutching a dirty rag doll, her stomach swollen with hunger. For a long, silent moment, the president said nothing. His chest rose and fell heavily, as if he were carrying the weight of the entire nation. And then, slowly, deliberately, he stood. The crowd fell silent. Even the restless wind seemed to pause. Ibrahim clenched his fists, his jaw tight with resolve. Then he turned sharply toward his chief of security. "Call the military hospital immediately," he ordered. "I want an ambulance here within 10 minutes. This woman needs medical care right now." The security chief blinked in confusion. "Sir, the military hospital? That's not standard procedure. And call the presidential residence," Ibrahim continued, his voice cutting through the air like thunder. "Tell them to prepare rooms for this family. They're coming to stay until we fix this situation." The chief hesitated, his radio trembling in his hand. "Sir, the residence? That's against protocol." "I don't care about protocol." Ibrahim's voice rose, fierce and raw. "I don't care about procedures. This woman is dying. These children are starving. And we have the power to help them right now. This very moment." He stepped closer, his eyes burning with conviction. "If we have the power to help and we choose bureaucracy instead, then what kind of men are we? What kind of leader am I?" The silence that followed was electric. No one dared speak. Even his guards, trained, disciplined, stoic, seemed shaken. Ibrahim turned back toward the frail woman. "What is your name, sister?" "Fatih," she whispered weakly. "My name is Fatih." "Fatih," Ibrahim said, his voice softening again. "I am taking you to the hospital. The best doctors will see you. Your children will have food, shelter, safety." He turned to Amadou, whose wide eyes shimmered with tears. "And you, Amadou." He paused, his voice breaking slightly. "You will never carry another brick. Do you hear me? Never again. From now on, you will go to school. You will be a child, as you were meant to be." Fatih's lips trembled. "But sir, we cannot pay. We have no money. The hospital will treat you because I command it," Ibrahim interrupted firmly. "The cost is not your burden. The nation has money. What it has lacked is the will to use it for those who truly need it." Outside, someone began to sob quietly, then another. Soon the sound spread like a wave through the gathered people, a raw, unfiltered sound of disbelief and hope colliding. Some whispered, "He won't keep his word." Others whispered, Maybe this time it's different." The ambulance siren began to echo faintly in the distance. Ibrahim stepped out of the shack, the sunlight hitting his face as hundreds of eyes turned toward him. Dust swirled in the air like smoke. He raised his hand for silence. "Listen to me," he called out, his voice firm, resonant, echoing across the narrow street. "What you see here today is not charity. This is not me being kind. This is justice." The crowd hushed completely. "This is what should have always been happening. These are our children. This is our nation. Their suffering is our failure. He paused, his gaze sweeping across the faces. Young, old, angry, hopeful. When I came to power, I promised change. But I know that many of you have heard promises before, so I will not give you another promise. His next words came like the strike of a hammer. I am making a commitment. Starting today, an emergency national program will begin. No child in Burkina Faso will be forced to work in dangerous conditions again. Every child will go to school. Every family will have access to health care. The crowd erupted, some cheering, others crying, some simply stunned into silence. The ambulance arrived, its engine humming softly. The medics lifted Fatih onto a stretcher, while Amadou and his sister clung to each other. Ibrahim helped guide them, his own hands steady, his face unreadable, part soldier, part servant of the people. As the vehicle door closed, he looked once more at Amadou through the window. The boy's small hand pressed against the glass. Ibrahim raised his hand in return. The convoy began to move, and the people parted like a sea around him, watching, wondering if they had just witnessed history. For the first time in a long while, the dusty streets of Ouagadougou felt alive with something forgotten: hope. The crowd waited in silence, hanging on to every word as Ibrahim Traoré faced them one last time. Will it be easy? No. Will it happen overnight? No. Will there be obstacles and opposition? Absolutely. But will we do it anyway? He paused, his voice rising above the dust and heat. Yes, because that is what it means to lead. The people erupted. Some cheered, others cried openly. For the first time in years, hope felt real. Moments later, the ambulance arrived, siren echoing through the narrow streets. Paramedics rushed inside the shack and emerged carrying Fatih on a stretcher, an IV in her arm. Amadou and his little sister followed, disbelief and hope written across their faces. Before the door shut, Amadou looked at Ibrahim. Their eyes met, a silent exchange of promise and faith. Is this real? His eyes seemed to ask. Ibrahim nodded once. Yes, it's real, but Ibrahim wasn't done. Turning to his aide, he commanded, I want every ministry to conduct an immediate census on child labor. Reports on my desk in 1 week, and send delegations into every neighborhood like this one. I want to know how many Amadis there are. How many Fatis? How many children are breaking under poverty? Sir, the cost, his aide began. The cost of ignoring them is higher, Ibrahim cut him off. We spend millions on ceremonies and defense. We can spend it on our children instead. Adjust the budget. Cut the waste. Find the money. That's an order. The crowd watched in awe as their president helped load Amadou's few possessions into a truck, his uniform stained with dust, his hands touching the worn belongings of the poor. It was a simple act, but a symbol too powerful to ignore. As his convoy prepared to leave, the elderly grandmother stepped forward once again. We will watch, she said. We will remember. Don't let us down. Hold me accountable, Ibrahim replied. I mean that. That night, the story spread like wildfire. Across Burkina Faso, on radio, television, and every screen that flickered in the dark, the people saw their president carrying bricks, comforting the poor, and keeping his word. International media picked it up. Some praised it as a revolution in leadership. Others mocked it as theater. But Ibrahim didn't care. His focus was not the headlines. It was the people. Within 2 days, Fatih was in treatment for tuberculosis. Amadou and his sister were enrolled in school. When a photo of Amadou in his new uniform, smiling, holding his first textbooks, went viral, the nation wept. Weeks passed. Data poured in. Tens of thousands of children like Amadou were found working in mines and construction. Ibrahim responded with a new decree, the Child Protection Initiative. No more child labor in dangerous sectors. Government stipends for poor families. Free school meals. Strict prosecution for exploiters. 6 months later, school enrollment soared by 37%. Child labor dropped by over half. When Ibrahim returned to that same neighborhood, the air was different, cleaner, brighter. A new school stood where dust once ruled, and Amadou ran to him, taller, stronger, beaming. Mr. President, I got the highest marks in mathematics. Ibrahim smiled and embraced him. Cameras clicked. A man and a boy, both forever changed. Later to the press, Ibrahim reflected quietly. True leadership isn't about grand speeches or power. It's about seeing one suffering soul and choosing not to look away. Change begins when one brick is lifted from one small shoulder, and then another and another until no child carries what they cannot bear. He looked toward the horizon. Real power, he said softly, is love in action.